Okay, well, was doing forecasts for a long time. We'll talk about that in a moment. I've done a couple of presentations in recent years. This was actually from a Grand Rapids meeting, I think, of AFS. See, I never corrected the. And I thought this was going to be part of the workshop, so I got the date wrong too. A few corrections to make. I don't know. It's all dated back to, okay, we're doing all this HCAMP stuff. What do we do with it? And in 94, I wrote in a draft report, which was never published, that noted that, gee, we didn't got hardly any one ocean fish, and from the Okanagan, and we were doing stock comp with scale pattern analysis, and I've got a relationship of 4 or 5 years, and it seems like a pretty straight line, and it's probably not going to be very many fish coming back the next year, and of course we had a record low. So I did these for a couple of years. And actually started doing it with spring chinook too. And so it looked like the first forecast that I did was in 1999 based on the oldest memo I could find, though I may have been doing it earlier and it's kind of lost. And before I became interested in history and archiving stuff, I did go through and throw things away occasionally. Now I'm learning to regret that happening. So anyway, I think I might have even done a forecast or two of spring chinook as well. So I was doing it for, I think, 25 years. I did it, but a little bit about sockeye forecasting. It's simpler and lower pressure than other it's going to be a nuisance. I guess that's the one I got hit. So 2 stocks, almost entirely natural origin. You got the Okanagan up here, and you got the Wenatchee over here, and you got Noah worries about the Idaho there worries about the few fish that return to the Snake. You got insignificant fisheries downstream of really up in Lake Wenatchee and the whole Wells Dam pool area. So you've got to count a fish at Bonneville Dam so you know what you got. So it's not like spring chinook where they're fishing a whole bunch of fish down here and hoping they're going to show up. So it makes it low pressure, and I suspect it's one reason why they just let me do it for so many years, is that it doesn't really matter all that much. You kind of want to know relative what you got. And as I say, the Zone 6 fisheries since the Endangered Species Act has been limited to only 7%. Prior to the listing in the early 90s, they had a goal of 65,000 at Priest Rapids, which is right here, and they would divvy up the rest of it. Half went to the tribes, half went downstream to the commercial fishery. And so then you did have fisheries downstream of Bonneville. There were years, and it's happened with spring chinook several times, where the fish get to Bonneville Dam, and where are they? We've already overcaught lower river. The tribes want to get their fish, so there the forecasting can be important. Not so much so for sockeye anymore. And so, as I mentioned, in the last 20 years, there's been significant sport fishing, mostly in here. The fish get blocked by the Okanagan River being too hot. So they're, what is it, like shooting fish in a barrel sort of thing? It's generally pretty easy. It wasn't this year. Not sure why that was. They had a harder time catching them, so we ended up with almost 500,000 fish at Wells, which, as I mentioned yesterday, is more fish than were estimated in the entire Fraser River last year. And normally they were just harvest, and temperatures would get them, but this year we had over 300,000 at Rososal Dam one day. We had 100,000 past the pit tag detection here and 60,000 or so at Zosel. So pretty amazing. So IDF and G forecast the sockeye run, had NOAA in this, but was told no uncertain terms as IDFG. And I tend to be conservative in my forecasts. So here's the kind of the change in fisheries. You can see before the 1980s here, where there's a lot of fishing going downstream of Bonneville, and now they've been pretty much wiped out. So let's see, in 2012, and there's a little bit of sport fishing in recent years, but not much. And the fishing has moved to the Bonneville to Maine Area Tribal Treaty, and a lot of fishing upstream, whereas before there really was virtually none. Forecasting for 2 and 3 ocean fish. I based the first report there. I just use sibling relationships, linear regression relationship between the 1 ocean and 2 ocean returns by stock, and the 2 ocean, you've got fish basically at it's almost entirely these days 1 freshwater, 1, 2, 3 saltwater. Used to see a lot more 2 freshwater, not so much anymore. And it's always been a challenge. Okay, what do I do with that first group? Originally was using smolt indices at McNary Dam, where they sort of try to estimate, just dip a few fish out, cover them up, and that's a smolt indice sort of idea. Doesn't work very well. Then I started using Wenatchee rotary screw traps, and since then I've been using acoustic trawl surveys. If I was still forecasting, I'd be out for further ideas. Right now I just kind of simply throw together numbers and consult with others and use my own judgment based on recent run history and ocean conditions. So here's what the estimated escapement to Bonneville Dam by brood year and stock age group has looked like. So we get about 2/3 age 4. It used to be the 3s predicted the 4 for the Okanagan really well. And so if you nail 66% of the run, you're a little over, a little under on the rest, you got a pretty good forecast. That was my philosophy for about 20 years, and it worked. And then you got these other groups too. The Okanagan run is 80-ish% of the run, 75-80%. The rest of it's Wenatchee. Age 5s used to be a mixture of 2 2s and 1 3s. Now they're mostly almost all 1 3s. So my forecast and actual return, I say I'm usually under forecasting. I like to think this is deliberate, but indeed I've learned that under forecasting is generally better. A little story, I always remember a commission meeting back in here, I think sometime about 7 or 8 years ago. I was on Sockeye, and I mentioned I do the Sockeye forecast, and afterwards this rough commissioner got up, an older guy, and so why do we bother with these forecasts? They're all wrong. None of them are any good, except for the Sockeye forecast. That Sockeye forecast was great. It was the last thing I was expecting to hear, because I had forecast 100,000. We got 200,000. You know, I learned right then and there, best to, under promise and over deliver than the other way around. It keeps people happy. Fishermen happier. So you can see here that my forecast versus actual escapement again skewed. So I'm under forecast 18 out of the 25 years here. My absolute deviations have been getting bigger. I was doing a whole lot better back in these days. Doing in recent years, which had these huge escapements. And I usually produce a little table like this. It's kind of fun to see what worked, what didn't. And I've been listening this year. I forecast 14,000 Wenatchee 4s. We got 105. So oops. And age 3s, I really under forecast those, but I'm using the smolt. It's harder to do anything with smolt, especially with all the things going on in the Okanagan. But it doesn't really matter much. Here, even I was off by a factor of 3, and it's only 20,000 fish. It's kind of rounding error. Here I was off by a factor of 8 or 9. Not so good. So anyway, I've always produced these little memos for NOAA every year, or not for NOAA, for the USV Oregon Technical Advisory Committee that does this. They spend days doing forecasts for Chinook. Then, what's your forecast? Give them this. Okay, approved. I think they'd want to keep it like that rather than making it part of the committee. They're also worried about me retiring one of these days. I think that's another reason. Then they got a problem. The relation between 1-1 and 1-2, you can see, especially at these lower levels, it's really a pretty good fit. Some of these, recent years, it seems like we're seeing some. These are more recent years with the bigger numbers. There's more of a spread. And so I've been playing around with smolt estimates too for a few years, and kind of a little more of a scatter shot. Those smolt estimates, I don't know, trying to use, I think there's a lot of problems with the smolt estimates, and then this is based on acoustic trawl surveys. And then, of course, there's a lot that goes on. We got 2 years of things going on rather than just 1 year. 4s and 5s is a pretty good relationship, though. If I wasn't originally forecasting this because they were fairly small numbers, but just noticed the relationship works pretty good. So this would have been my 2024 forecast here, and this was something I did last year, so I don't have it updated. And smolt, and this one here is my downfall here. See, 22, 23, 24, I had a nice relationship. And then 23 to 20, 22 to 24 happened. And here we're talking about, 140,000 fish returning and a smolt estimate of 400,000 or so, 500,000. Either smolt to adult return is incredible, or the smolt estimate is on the low side, and something's happening. The Wenatchee is doing all kinds of wonderful things in the Okanagan, and I talked about it yesterday. And if you compare 9 with now with the 90s when I started, and we're just, it's a much bigger ratio for the Okanagan than the Wenatchee. I think we're doing all kinds of wonderful things for the Okanagan, but the Wenatchee is going like gangbusters too, in terms of its numbers. My guess is just a less oligotrophic lake, just a warming climate and more productive, and we should be able to tease that out. I've just got to find the time and probably get the expertise, since I'm not an expert in that area. And the relationship, like with the Okanagan, the relationship between 4s and 5s isn't bad, but we're usually talking fairly low numbers, 220,000, 20,000, so they're not that much spread on the y-axis. And I played around a little bit with NOAA ocean condition ranks, and years ago I used to do a lot more playing around with things. I find something that worked for a year or two and then kind of drop it, and pretty much back to the good old thing. I tried looking at the rank and comparing it to the smolt to adult return rate. It seemed to get a good relationship, worked for a couple of years, then out the window. Anyway, some conclusions. Okanagan, the 4s make up about 65% of the run, as I mentioned. My philosophy, get it right, you got a good forecast. Well, except for now, the Wenatchee 4s are getting to be a pretty good number too. The Wenatchee H5 forecast is okay, actually 4 is bad, problem. So I'm not sure what the story is there. Looking ahead, I think Sockeye forecast could get more difficult and more important. We've got increased runs that have led to the increased expectation of sockeye harvest, which could lead to conflicts. I always remember a meeting back in, I think it was 2016, right after we had the big run in 2015 that mostly died getting to the spawning grounds. We had a harvest meeting, and WDFW said it was, they're laying out what they wanted to harvest, and we got to have a run of at least 300,000, or we're not going to have enough fish to go around. And here I'm thinking back to the days in the 90s when the average run for the decade was, for the Okanagan, was like 15,000. My, how expectations have grown. Changing age composition, and you're seeing a little bit of movement in age composition. Doesn't show that data. It's probably not a significant issue. You've got restoration efforts in the Yakima and Deschutes, so far they haven't amounted to much. Yakima's got a lot of problems. Deschutes has never gotten off the ground, but it's an itty-bitty lake too, so I think the Yakima may at one time been a pretty big producer, but that lower river is worse than the Okanagan. It's amazing the Okanagan fish survive. But it could complicate things a little bit, and it's probably, again, like the changing age composition, not all that big of a deal. Okanagan, maybe more so in terms of now you've got not just Soyuz Lake, you've got Sockeye Lake, you've got Okanagan Lake. Okanagan Lake is huge. If you can get decent production out of Okanagan Lake, and we're seeing that Sockeye is producing pretty well there too. So I think that's one reason my forecast may not be as good, is you got a much more variable system there with different lakes producing, and then Okanagan. It's probably a good time to be getting out of this forecasting business. So, anyway, that's it.
Thanks, you, Jeff.
Any questions? Yep.
With passage restored to Okanagan Lake, are you what's your sense? Do you think that we're going to see the Columbia River Sockeye, particularly the Okanagan, continue to kind of defy expectations and trend upward, or?
Boy, you always wonder about this stock. Talked about it a lot yesterday. Maybe I was there yesterday, and I gave it kind of my tributes, I think, a couple of years ago to about Kim Hyatt and intermixed with some other stuff. And he always had a saying. He would say, and I thought of it a lot this year, that these fish will make mugs of you. His mother was British, mugs being fools. And I've been saying for the last few years, ever since 2015, these fish, you gotta get up there early. You gotta get up early, before July 1st. Well, what did they do this year? They waited to the end of August. 95% survival. They had one dip they could have gone for, but they didn't. Or some of them did. They did pretty well. So, but yeah, I don't know. The Okanagan Lake potential is huge. The problems, the issues there you've got are the fact that in terms of river spawning, the alluvial fans where they would have spawned are all where all the towns and cities are in that area. On the other hand, the Okanagan stock sockeye and the Soyuz used to do lake spawning. The ones they're moving to Yakima, the Okanagan ones, are doing lake spawning. And last year they saw what they think is a couple of fish lake spawning in Okanagan Lake. So if they can lake spawn in there, maybe you could get some big numbers. And they're working on a lot of habitat work too. The ONA's done wonderful things with habitat up there. So Mission Creek, they've been working on Mission Creek, probably the big producer. Some of the other creeks they've been getting rid of passage barriers and setting back dikes and all that sort of thing. So. Knowing the good things happening up there, and on the other hand, you got that Okanagan River, which is pretty nasty, and a warming climate. Sawyer's Lake's not great, but amazing story.